on our agenda. We really truly love to live our mission here. I thought I'd share some exciting numbers with everyone. This year, just through April, we've actually welcomed 20 new members here. Just by comparison, in 2021, we had 20 new members throughout the entire year. And so we're not even quite halfway through the entire year yet. Next week, we will be celebrating the confirmation of 7 confirmands. Yeah. That's actually the largest confirmation class we've had in about 4 years or so, maybe even 4 or 5 years. And next week, also, 2 of those confirmands will be getting baptized. So we're so grateful for the confirmation mentors, Becca's leadership, as well as everyone who's just, poured their hearts into supporting those kids as they take their faith journey. And as we talked about this morning, we have almost 300 local kids registered for VBS. For some of those kids, as Leanne mentioned earlier, that's the only week of the year that they get to experience and hear about and live out and learn about Jesus. So we're so grateful for AUMC for committing to the local community, that VBS is free. We're one of not very many VBS programs that's free in this community, and it really does make an impact. We also, talking about the youth again, we had 10 youth that just participated in 30-hour famine, and 9 youth who are registered already for Army this coming summer. So those are really impressive numbers. These youth are committed to our church. We're so proud of them. So again, really looking forward to what God has in store for Atascocita UMC this next year. We're so grateful for all of you, for your ongoing support and gifts. My friend over here to my right is going to give a bit of a financial update. And again, just thank you again for all of the love and energy and commitment you pour into this church.
Thank you. My name's Tanya Whitfield, and I am the finance chair this year. Like Laura said, I'm going to go over some very exciting numbers that we have. We're really happy with where the church is at. That's really small. It didn't turn out So we're operating at a surplus at this point, meaning that our money that we've received in due to your gifts and other income is surpassing what we've budgeted, and we're at a surplus of about $27,000. So that's an amazing number. Also, in addition to that, we also have a good sum of money in the bank because of the 2 PPP loans that we've qualified for, and those were forgiven, and also the sale of the parsonage. So we've got a very good number sitting in the bank. Because of that, we've been able to pay off an additional $100,000 on our capital debt loan that we had and lower that amount of money. We have changed that to a revolving line of credit, so if at any point we do need some of that funds back for anything that may pop up, we are able to have access to that. I know that we kind of mentioned it before, but I do want to mention it again. We also did the fundraiser for the playground fence that we surpassed our goal, and that was over $22,000, and also the fundraising that we did for UMCOR for the Ukraine relief, and that was over $11,000. So you might see if you're looking at any of the numbers on these reports and you see that some of them are a little bit higher than what we budgeted, those are where those numbers are coming from.
Turn me on. Let me say that these numbers, you can't see them, I'm sorry. But if ever you want to see a financial statement, you can come to church office and we'll give you one. So I want to make clear that there's no secret stuff that's happening around here, and you want to see a financial statement, you can come by the office. We're happy to give you one. Our finance committee meets monthly, and they go over it with a fine-tooth comb, asking questions about why are we over budget in this category and why are we under on this one. And so we have a group of about 11 people, I think we are, somewhere in that neighborhood, that are really keeping a very close eye on it. But just, we want you to be informed. We want you to be as informed as you want to be. We're not going to make you read financial statements, because I know a lot of people are like, what? But they're available. And so we'll have a time for questions. So if you have any questions, we can talk about that as we move on.
Hi, everybody. I'm Stacy Spindle, and I'm chair of the Board of Trustees. And my family and I have been members here since 1996. So it's great to see so many people at a town hall. I mean, good job coming out for that. So we have some pictures of some of the things that we've been doing around the campus that we're going to go through. And first, I have to say we have an amazing group of trustees, and we always have had an amazing group of trustees at this campus. We just happen to have found ourselves in a very unique one-time position that we don't ever want to be in, again, with the freeze, and got to take, I guess, really just make lemonade out of lemons. So some of the things that we were able to do was because of the insurance funds and the PPE loans and things that we, again, don't ever want to have to go through again, but we were able to make it into a positive for sure. So just showing, I guess the first slide is a beautified entrance thanks to the Cades who fixed our fountain. And the next slide, please. And just a beautified landscaping. Calvin and Cliff were kind of adamant that we had to dig out 12 inches of clay to permanently fix all of the beds so that everything we put in it wouldn't continue to drown, you know, from the water that would go in it for the clay. So I think they're permanently, hopefully, fixed, and that anything we plant there should continue to grow. So those guys, I think, are up here maybe a couple of times, if not 3 times a week, looking at the plants and taking care of things. So we really appreciate it. We had a great turnout for Church Work Day, that fun, multi-generational. I mean, just super. I think everybody that came really had fun. So next time we have one, you're going to want to be there, even if it's for 10 or 15 minutes or 4 hours, whatever you're up for. So next, I have a picture of the renovated Life Center kitchen, and really the entire Life Center was renovated. All of the classrooms are pretty much brand new cabinetry, new paint, new walls, new gym floor. And I particularly show this kitchen because I want you to keep it in mind later on when we talk about renovating our other kitchen. We kind of want it to look similar. So everything over there. If you have not been in the Life Center, I encourage you to go take a group over there. I was with a group about 3 years ago, and they were like, I didn't know that was part of our church property. There was actually people that didn't know that was ours. So we have an amazing campus with a lot of flexibility for use within our church and in the community. So we also upgraded the church parking lights to upgrade our safety and security with LED lights. If you haven't come by at night, you might not notice it, but we have a lot of activities going on at night, and we felt like this was really important. And so the next one will be our upgraded playground fence. If you haven't driven around there, just take a little drive around the parking lot today, and you'll see the fence is up. The playground equipment's been slow on just due to supply chain issues, but as it's coming in, it's just going to really be an upgrade for us. And then not as exciting as some of those other things, but ongoing needs, and I spared you all of the plumbing fixtures that have been replaced, but lo and behold, we have 24 air conditioning units, and one of them is always going out. Always. So every time you see an air conditioning, thing, it's not the same one, it's a different one. But we've been able to keep up with that and replace them as needed. And we're really working on some planned maintenance. Thanks to Brian Hallbald is putting together some planned maintenance for us, so we can kind of plan ahead instead of, react as often. We also, due to the flood, replaced a lot of our plumbing with the PEX plumbing. That should last a lot longer. If you would have seen some of the pipes that were corroded and the rust in it, you would have just been appalled. So sprinkler things always going on, toilet things always going on. So big thanks to Dara and Jesse, who do an amazing job on a day-to-day keeping up our church maintenance. Yes. Thank you, Dara and Jesse, if you're watching. And then looking ahead, we have three main, big projects that we're looking at and in the process of getting quotes and really narrowing down to a granular level of what do we really need, because we do try to be cost conscious with the generosity of our congregation, but really being good stewards of that money. And one is upgrading the Wesley lighting. So we were able to fix it to make it good enough, I would say, before Christmas Eve service, so you could actually see. But when you are looking online, it just doesn't, it doesn't have as good an image as what it does in our other sanctuary.
I've been told I look like a raccoon online, so.
That's a nicer, no.
Oh, that's a nice, it's probably one of the nicer things I've been called, so.
But just upgrading it, it's hot. The choir has some issues seeing, and then our online presence is something that we know is going to be a continued need. So looking at that is going to be a rather large expense. Dave has been working on it for I think like a year with experts. So that's upcoming. The next one is upgrading our Asbury kitchen, our mauve. We're going to get rid of the mauve and make it look like the other. And a big thanks to the Mastons, who have participated in a big grant for us to help us do that. So we're looking at getting also ovens that cookie sheets actually fit in, and that we can use that kitchen a little bit more. And then the last one is our covered walkway, and I apologize you can't see that picture, but going out from the fountain along that wall, that's kind of an arch-shaped wall out by the pastor's offices, having that go out all the way to the mailbox. So that's something that we're looking at. So that you can drive under, etc. And a big thanks to Calvin, who's worked really hard with Mako Engineers, who's done this with a lot of churches to bring down the cost on that, but to make it look very consistent with our campus, something very nice, and brick where it will support brick. So that's it for the trustees. Sorry I went a little longer probably, but we do have some exciting things going on, and we are proud of our campus. So encourage you to use it for things in the community as well, because we do rent out to outside groups as long as there's certain rules, but encourage the community to come here as often as they can, and hopefully they will come and visit us as a church as well. Thank you.
My name is Ann Gibbons, and I have the pleasure, and I use the word pleasure, of serving as the chairman of Staff Parish Relations Committee. I see faces in here of some of you that have chaired this committee before. I see many of the committee members that are in here today, and I just want to thank this committee and all of those that have come before us for all of the wonderful work you've done. I don't have any slides. Mine will be short and sweet. But if I did, I would have 2 slides. The first would be of a huge heart, because we have a staff that gives their heart and soul to AUMC in everything they do. And I mean that sincerely. It is such a pleasure to have such a committed staff. Is this real wood? I'm knocking on wood because I don't want to jinx anything I've just said. I thought it was real wood. I would also have a big smiley face, because I am walking around with a smile on my face. We have pastors that truly lead our church in such a loyal, dedicated way, and we're blessed. And we have staff, that give and give of themselves. Now, the reason this committee is titled Staff Parish Relations is because we need every one of you. We need the interaction of our staff and our congregation to make AUMC work. Our staff doesn't do all the work. You as the congregation do as well. And it takes all of us working harmoniously together. We're in a good spot right now, folks. If you ever have any concerns, don't hesitate to call me or call somebody you know that is on this committee. Share your thoughts. And always go that extra mile to give a pat on the back to our staff for what they do for us. If you don't know some of them, get to know them. For those of you that are here with us today, stand up if you will, if you're on staff with us. I see some of you. Woohoo! Thank you all, and thank those that are not here. I told you, I'm short and sweet and happy.
My name is Mel Griffin, and I have the real privilege of serving as the lay leader for the congregation this year. And we've heard numbers now about people, and we've heard numbers about finance, the wonderful work that the trustees are doing, and the great staff we have. I thought as lay leader it might be appropriate to take a spiritual assessment of our congregation. And instead of just looking at ourselves and comparing ourselves to ourselves, maybe a wider view of our congregation compared to the Methodist Church in a little larger sense. And so you might ask, well, what credentials do you have to do that? Well, I'm glad you asked. Carolyn, my wife, and I go back to youth in the Methodist Youth Fellowship before it was United Methodist, before we joined with the EUB, Evangelical United Brethren, to become the United Methodist Church. In fact, in that youth group, there was a gentleman one evening afterwards that just offhandedly said to me, you know, Carolyn's going to make a wonderful wife for somebody. And I thought, she's really pretty. I mean, what do you think a 17-year-old mind is thinking? But he was a prophet of God. And a few years later, we were married in that small church. We went to a little bit larger church. This was in Abilene, Texas. And then we went to the Northern Illinois Conference for about 37 years. And there I had the privilege of working as a part of the district and the annual conference evangelism programs, and served as a lay speaker for several years doing pulpit. So I got a chance to see a lot of different congregations. And when we arrived at the church that we joined, about 750 members, a little smaller than this congregation. How many adult Sunday schools would you guess they had? 0. Nada. None. The attitude was, I learned everything I needed to know about my Christian faith in Sunday school as a child and in confirmation. And now as an adult, I take my children to Sunday school and I do church, and boom, we're out in an hour. I'm not the sharpest pencil in the pack, I'll admit, but I could kind of see things were not going well in the broader church. And when we left to come back to this Atascocita area, we said, let's look at some non-denominational independent churches. And we visited a bunch. In fact, we called it double dipping. We go to the early church service at one and a later church service at another one. And finally, reluctantly, said, let's go to Atascocita UMC. We didn't find anything that really we felt God calling us to. You can't imagine the joy. Excuse me. When I looked and saw 8 adult Sunday school classes, I think, listed, and they're telling all about what was going on in the Sunday school classes, and A couple of them had ages associated with them, and I said, well, I really don't want to go to an old people's Sunday school class. So I picked one that had a really interesting write-up, and we made our way up to the second floor of the education wing. The average age was about 45 years younger than we were. But it was a great Sunday school class, and at the end of it, Danielle Vircher, she was not Vircher then, but she didn't just say, let me show you where you belong. She said, lovingly taking us by the hand, let me introduce you to John Haskins. I think he has a Sunday school class that you will really enjoy. And was she ever right? To go in and see 30 people, 30 plus, studying God's Word and being excited, putting it into practice in their lives, serving each other. As I've had a chance to talk to other men in the congregation about their Sunday school classes, I think there might have been half of those Sunday school classes that Carolyn and I would have fit in just fine, and yet the one that we ended up is kind of like the fish that swallows the bait and the hook. They're pretty well on the line. We were hooked. And so what else about this church besides our Sunday school program? Men's group. Let me tell you, in the wider Methodist view of things, I have never seen a men's group as active and as spiritually oriented as the men in this congregation. The Bible study, their social outreach that comes out of their love of God and love of others. I'm not saying that they don't exist. I'm just saying I've not seen one. I asked Carolyn for this. I said, what about the women? I knew the women in Illinois were very active. I said, how would you compare them to AUMC? And she said, quote, there is no comparison. I said, is it because they're more spiritually oriented here? And she said, yes. I could go on, and you've heard some of the other things, you know, the ministries and missions that we're involved in. There's a lot of other churches that do those things, but they do it from a point of a social gospel. It's just social. There's no evangelism coming from the heart because we love God. We're here to serve you and whatever. And that's what is behind every single ministry and mission that I see in this congregation. I'm going to do a jump cut here. And in physics, there are two quantities. There are vectors and scalars. You're going to learn something. A scalar is just a number. Speed is a scalar. A vector has a direction and a magnitude. Momentum is a vector. And let me say, in my opinion, we are headed in the right direction, not our direction, God's direction, with momentum, with a magnitude that is increasing as we go forward. And that's very, very exciting. That's not to say that we're a perfect congregation. You never will be because you let me be a member, but that's, you know. I would kind of finish with two thoughts, a word of warning and a word of encouragement. The word of warning is we have kind of a difficult path coming, and we'll talk about that. And one that we don't choose or prefer, but it's here. And let me just ask you, please do not allow feelings and emotions to rise up and rule. When emotions rule, Satan is a master manipulator, and he will use those against us to the extent that he can. Make a conscious decision, an act of the will, to have this attitude. I can have my say, but I don't have to have my way. I had to take that to heart a couple of times. I've been kind of a singular voice a couple of times in leadership. I don't mean a minority of 51, 49, not even a small minority. I'm talking singular voice. But that's all right. I can have my say. I don't have to have my way. It's not about me. It's not about any of you. It's not about a group of us in leadership trying to send things in a particular direction. It's about all of us together. It's us working, pulling on the same end of the rope. That's the way I said it. Let me read how Paul expresses it much more eloquently. When he went from Asia Minor into Europe the first time, Philippi, congregation that he was very close to, and he wrote these words. I think they apply to us as we go into this time of discernment. Make my joy complete by being like-minded, having the same love, being one in spirit and of one mind. Do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. Rather, in humility, value others above yourselves, not looking to your own interest, but each of you to the interest of others. In your relationships with one another, have the same mindset as Christ Jesus, who being in very nature God, did not consider equality with God something to be used to his own advantage. Rather, he made himself nothing by taking the very nature of a servant. Think on those words. Let's attempt to keep it in our will and not in our emotions. Can I have a prayer?
Sure. I'm always for prayer.
Let's pray. Heavenly Father, you know we head down a road that we don't want to go, and yet we know you will go with us. Our pastors have been leading us in a great sermon series on James. A couple of the thoughts from that book. One, James said, we have not because we ask not. In another place he said that those of us who lack wisdom should ask God, and God would answer that prayer. And so we ask for wisdom, Lord, your wisdom, not the wisdom of the world that's no wisdom at all, but your wisdom. Not just knowing what's right, but to know what's right and to do what's right, to have the faith and the courage to know and to do what you have for us. Lord, when Elijah hid in the cave listening for your voice, there was a mighty wind, an earthquake, and a fire. But you didn't come in those ways. You came in a still, small voice. Father, we ask that in this time as we go forward, we would listen so that we might hear that small, still voice and obey it, ignoring all the wind and the noise of the fires and all of the distractions going on around us. Help us keep our minds and our vision on you. Help us to seek joy by keeping Jesus first, others before ourselves. And we give you the praise and thanks for what work you'll do in this congregation as we go forward. We are excited because you're among us. In Jesus' name, amen.
I'm really super excited about what is happening here at AUMC. As Mel talked about, we've got some momentum, and I'm pretty sure that God's not going to allow that momentum to stop, despite the uncomfortable conversation that we have to have a little bit later. So right now we're taking any questions that you might have about this church, the things that we've talked about. If it relates to the denominational stuff, we're going to wait for that. So John, you need to come down to the microphone. You can take it to him. I got you. So he said he's suggesting that we have a senior game time, I guess during the week, one time a week.
Because everything else in this group we have is for the children and the intermediate, elderly, under 65. They have golf or stuff like that. But the seniors have nothing.
Okay, great. Thank you. Push the button. Any other questions? I can't read that, Madeline. My eyes are old. Do we have a question online? Okay.
There's nothing on here.
Yeah, there's nothing showing up here. So if you are online, you can ask a question from that link. So, any other questions about the church? All right. Well, good report, everybody. Good work. So, and I just want to take this opportunity to say how grateful I am for our leadership. We have great leaders at AUMC. They're willing to give of themselves and give of their time. And I just am so grateful because we wouldn't be doing all the things we do if it wasn't for all the leaders. And so thank you to all of those here and all of those that are serving on committees. We're grateful for your leadership. So, all right, we're going to move to the next section, which is we're talking about some of the things that are happening in our denomination. I gave you a handout that was just sort of a glossary of terms. We have a lot of terms in the United Methodist Church, and wanted to just make sure you had all of those. You can take that with you. Afterwards, we'll have a few handouts that you may pick up if you so choose. So, but I thought I would start with just sort of a brief history of Methodism, a brief history of Methodism, because what we're feeling right now feels absolutely like earth-shattering. Like it almost like end of the world, Jesus is coming back kind of stuff. But the Methodist Church, the big, gigantic Methodist Church, has been through things like this before. So it was really started by John Wesley and his brother Charles as an attempt to revive the Anglican Church, the Church of England. Both were Episcopal or Anglican priests, not Episcopal priests. And they had a new way of sort of looking at things. For Wesley, what had happened in the Anglican Church is it really just became about saying the right things and doing the right things. And he really felt like it should be about the heart. He had an experience where he was on a ship that was in a storm, and he was petrified about dying, and there was a group of Moravians, German people, that were not, and they were actually singing hymns. So what has become Wesleyan has been deeply affected by the Moravians and sort of their view on that. So Charles and John wanted to sort of recast the Anglican Church. And he started ordaining priests and sending them over here to America to sort of help bring sort of his form of Anglicanism. Then the Revolutionary War breaks out, and he recalls all of his priests, except this one guy named Francis Asbury stayed, and a few others stayed. And so Revolutionary War happens. We end up with more Methodists after the Revolutionary War than before. And they weren't a separate denomination. They were still part of the Church of England, but at that point, nobody wanted to be Church of England. So the Church of England changed their name to the Episcopalians because they were all about episcopacy and the bishop. And the Methodist Church became the Methodist Episcopal Church. And so it became a separate denomination. John Wesley died in 1791, claiming to be a good Anglican priest. It was never his idea to start a new denomination. It was because of circumstances that happened in America. And actually, Methodists sort of went back and backfilled in England and in Europe. And so the Methodist Church was born because of the circumstances of the American Revolution. So it puttered along and it grew. We had circuit riders, and it grew significantly. And then the Civil War was looming, and it was in 1844. The Methodist Church split into the Methodist Episcopal Church South and the Methodist Episcopal Church. So they split over the issue of slavery, and it's where Southern Methodist University comes from. It was founded in like 1901, and it was founded by the Southern Methodists. So we ran separate camps, Methodist Episcopal Church, Methodist Episcopal Church South, until 1938. And then we reunited in 1938, and there was an African American conference. It was called a Central Conference, and they sort of were separate. And so the Methodist Church lasted from 1938 until 1968, when we merged with a group we're called the Evangelical United Brethren. In the Texas Annual Conference, we had one church that was an EUB church. It was in Lissy Prairie, out near Katy. But in other places, there was a significant merger of folks. And basically, these were our German-speaking brothers and sisters that thought the same way we did, believed the same way we did, and basically over time had stopped worshiping in German because they became Americanized. And so we joined the Methodist Church and the United Evangelical Brethren. We joined in 1968. So in 1968 is when the United Methodist Church was born. So, somebody today told me that they went to a Methodist church before we were United Methodist. So our denomination's 54 years old. So we've been through this before. And the Wesleyan movement is huge. There's over 80 million people around the world that sort of identify themselves as Wesleyan. And so while this feels really earth-shaking to us at this point in time, we've been down the road before. So to give you an update on where we are, I just need to give you a brief, little bit more history lesson. So our church has been in conversation about the place of same-sex marriage in particular and ordaining homosexuals since 1972. That's when we had sort of the first discussion about that. And so we have a body that's called the General Conference, and it is literally a worldwide body made up of an equal number of clergy and lay delegates from literally all over the world. And that is our single legislative body. They make the rules that apply to all United Methodists across the world. And so they are scheduled to meet every 4 years. And so they're the rule makers. And so every 4 years, our General Conference is met. Every 4 years, this is the same-sex issue, human sexuality issue, has been a question. And so, and there were protests, and things got disrupted, and business didn't happen. And so it kind of kept going and got worse as far as the interruption of the actual business of the church. And so we got to our General Conference of 2016. And at that conference, basically all the delegates said, you know what? We're not talking about this issue of human sexuality this time. We got more business that we need to take care of, so we're going to set a special called General Conference in 2019. And that's going to be the only issue that we talk about. And that made everybody happy. And so 2016 General Conference happened. They made a few tweaks to the rules, and it was done. And so we had the General Conference of 2019. There were several plans that were submitted. I think there were kind of three big contenders. And at the end of the day, the traditionalists won out the day in 2019. And what that meant was that we didn't change our policy on this particular issue, that it remains the same. They did a couple of things to try to tighten sort of accountability on it, but that didn't work very well. And so after 2019, some of our progressive folks, mostly on the left coast, but some on the right coast, basically decided that the rules no longer applied. And somewhere in there, openly gay bishop was elected, and they started doing same-sex weddings in their churches, and the pastors were performing them, and they just didn't care what the rules said. They felt that they were basically empowered by the Lord to break the rules. And so that has been going on since 2019. And so the traditionalists kind of looked up and said, well, if we can't even keep our rules, why do we want this place? I mean, they really saw the United Methodist Church as almost irretrievably broken as far as its ability to govern itself. And so they said, we're going to go do a new thing. And so they set about setting up a new Methodist denomination that bears the name the Global Methodist Church. And it is basically a new expression of Methodism that is reflecting basically the same values that we have now. They've taken most of our book of discipline, taken the good parts, and kept some of the things that they didn't like guaranteed appointment, and took those out. And so we've been bumping along. I mean, we've literally been kicking the can down the road every 4 years since 1972. Our regularly scheduled general conference after 2019 was 2020. And so we fully anticipated that we would go to 2020. There was something called the Protocol for Graceful Exit, Grace and Reconciliation. They actually got a lot of traction of a way for the United Methodist Church to split up. I believe had 2020 General Conference met, it would have passed, and we would have had a much more genteel separation. And so, but COVID came along, and 2020 didn't happen. And so it got postponed to 2021, and then it got postponed to 2022. And most recently, the General Conference Commission, the group that's responsible for having that body, said, we can't do it, we're going to postpone it to 2024. So when that happened, a lot of folks kind of just had their belly full, for lack of a better description. So the Global Methodist Church said, and they had been ready for this, they were waiting for this more amicable separation to happen, but since it's been postponed for 2 years now, they basically said, we're open for business. And that has accelerated all of this discussion, and it seems like kicking the can down the road is no longer an option for some folks. Some folks will be happy to kick the can down the road to 2024 and see what happens there. So the Global Methodist Church is open for business. To my knowledge, the only churches that have joined them as yet are the United Methodist Church of Bulgaria and Romania. So they joined on May the 1st because of some circumstances that happened in their area. It's anticipated that most of the African church will join the Global Methodist Church, that they will leave the UMC and go to the GMC. I think there's a lot in the Philippines and Korea where we have pretty significant Methodist populations as well, are anticipated because they have more traditional understandings about same-sex marriage and those things. And so as this general conference has been postponed, we have found ourselves having lots of conversations. And so one of the conversations centered around, can an annual conference leave as a unit? The second question is, can a jurisdictional conference meet if a general conference doesn't happen? So we have a group that's called the Judicial Council. You'll find them on your glossary. They are, in essence, our Supreme Court. What they say goes. There's no place to appeal it. The only thing that you could do is go to a general conference and create different legislation, which they then might find unconstitutional. Not the United States Constitution, but the Methodist Constitution. They act very much like our Supreme Court. So the Council of Bishops, which is all the active bishops and some retired ones, put two questions before the Judicial Council. And the first one was, can an annual conference leave the United Methodist Church as a group? And the second one is, can a jurisdictional conference meet if there's not a general conference? Well, we got an answer to the first question. You may have heard some discussion about the annual conference, Texas annual conference wanting to leave en masse. There was a lot of momentum and talk around that, but the ruling of the Judicial Council said, nope, can't happen. Which, in my opinion, kind of puts us in the situation where every church is now having to have a vote, and it's a much more harmful way for, I think, a lot of this to happen. For not just our church, but all churches in the Texas Annual Conference in the United Methodist Church. So that question has been asked and answered, so that is no longer a conversation at annual conference this year. We're waiting on the second question, as can a jurisdictional conference meet if the general conference doesn't. Now, the jurisdictional conference, the only thing they do is elect bishops and appoint bishops. That's all they do. So if our South Central jurisdiction is where we are, if they meet sometime this year, we will get a new bishop because our bishop will age out. A bishop has to be able to serve a quadrennium, which is a fancy word for 4-year term, and 72 is the mandatory retirement age. And so our bishop can serve up to 2024, which if General Conference and Jurisdictional Conference 2020 had happened, he would have been able to serve out to 2024. But because Jurisdictional Conference would happen in 2022, he will age out and we will get a new bishop. Our bishop has really pledged to be very transparent about this and to do all that he can to help the churches that don't want to be here. And so he's created, our cabinet really has created some rules around our annual conference and if a church wants to leave. And the financial part of it is that you have paid 2 years apportionments, last year's and this year's, and that you pay an unfunded pension liability, which we can talk about later. It's sort of a mystery number. Some people are calling foul on the way they're calculating it. But those are the things that they've asked for churches to take care of when they leave. There are other bishops that, because of the trust clause in the United Methodist Church, are claiming that you have to pay anywhere between 30 and 50% of the asset value of your plant. So if our church is worth, say, $5 million, and they're charging 50% of your value to leave, you would have to pay $2.5 million on top of the unfunded pension liability and your apportionments. And so there's some concern amongst the leaders of our annual conference as to what the next bishop might do. So it appears that if our churches of the Texas Annual Conference want to leave, that there may be a small window in which you can do it with grace. I don't know where that's all going yet, but it appears that that might be the case. But we're still learning about these things. So just to be clear, the United Methodist Church has a trust clause in which your congregation does not own your property outright. We hold it in trust for the Texas Annual Conference. And so there has long thought that they have some clause and some ability to keep churches from leaving. There's been a legal development in that regard last week. A church in the North Texas Annual Conference called Blue Ridge United Methodist Church, which changed their name to Christ United Church, basically changed their corporate documents and told the North Texas, we're gone. We don't care. And the North Texas Annual Conference sued Blue Ridge United Methodist Church, now Christ United Church, claiming the trust clause, exercising, in essence, their trust clause. The judge in Collin County issued a summary judgment in favor of the church, the little church, not the big church. I've talked to a couple of lawyers. It really, in essence, kills the trust clause in the state of Texas. So that's an interesting development that has happened. There likewise was a similar lawsuit where the South Central jurisdiction brought suit against Southern Methodist University because they did very much the same thing. They said, you know, we're claiming our property for our own. South Central jurisdiction sued them, and the judge found in favor of SMU as well. So it appears as if there's an excellent chance that the trust clause, at least within the state of Texas, no longer applies. So what all that means, I don't know. I mean, we're still sorting some stuff out, right? So my goal in this is to, A, bring you up to speed on some things that our church has done, what is happening in the denomination, and let you ask questions. And forgive me, but I don't know, might be a frequent answer depending upon what questions you ask. So I want to tell you that your leadership has done two things. The first, in response to the canceling of General Conference to 2024. At the ad board meeting immediately following that decision to postpone that, we made the decision that we were no longer paying general church apportionments. So we have, since April, been withholding those payments. We are accruing them so that we can pay them if we need to, if we choose to at some point in time. So we have the money sitting in a savings account to pay them if we ever want to. So that was a decision that your ad board made. We are continuing to pay our annual conference and our district apportionments because we feel like the leadership there has been good, there's value in it, and it's a part of our vow, really. But the board and myself were thoroughly disgusted with sort of the effort to have general conference. And so as a result, we have, and let me say that we were kind of tardy to the party because a lot of churches in our annual conference have not been paying their general apportionments for the same reason. The second thing that your ad board has done, and I'll explain why, but we have officially entered into a period of discernment about disaffiliating with the United Methodist Church. And the reason that we did that is twofold. A, we're talking about it already. B, we cannot get our formal unfunded pension liability until we enter into that process. And C, the third reason that we're doing it is it gets our meter running on our discernment process. We don't know exactly what that's going to look like yet. So we're having a meeting on Wednesday to talk about what that's going to look like. It's going to be some town halls. It's going to be some cottage meetings. It's going to be a place for you to express your opinion. It's going to be a place for you to get information. We don't yet know what that process is going to look like because we were responding to the cancellation or the ruling by the Judicial Council that an annual conference can't leave. And so if this is something that churches chooses to do, great. The only thing this obligates us to do going into this period of discernment is talk about it. Well, here we are already talking about it. So it just will create a formal process through which we can talk about it and disseminate information. So those are 2 actions that your leadership board has taken that I just wanted to bring you up to speed with. Is there anything else I need to say? Leanne? This is where we are. And I will tell you this. I watched our bishop talk at one of his Guiding Through the Waters thing. And if you want to go and look at this, it's on the website, txcumc.org. You can find all of this. But he started one of these conferences with, it's breaking my heart. I didn't sign up for this. But he's convicted that the United Methodist Church is going to split in 2022. He doesn't know how or what or whatever, but that's his conviction. And the part I want you to hear, though, in that is it's breaking his heart. Having this conversation is not something I signed up for. I signed up to be a shepherd and take care of people and preach God's word. I'm not excited about this, but it's sort of the cup that's come to me. And so because I'm your pastor, I'll do the very best I can to be open and transparent and honest, and just know that I don't want to drink this stuff, but it's come to me. And so here we are. And so in that spirit, I want to answer any questions that you have. We all can contribute to the answers as we go along. So I'm going to open it up for questions. Did you want to say something?
Yeah, I was just going to say, before we take questions and hopefully give answers better than I don't really know, I didn't sign up for this, and this is breaking my heart is a really accurate description of, I think, every United Methodist pastor at this point. And I think that it's really important as we move into this period of discernment that no matter what our feelings are about the issues surrounding it, that we all pray for the church and for one another. And in that spirit, one of the things that you can pick up on your way out is a calendar of prayers. For the coming week, there's a daily verse and a daily prayer for you to spend some time with. But then I would invite you to continue and extend past the week as we move into this to pray with and for one another and for our church, our local church, as we do this. And then just sort of a reminder that as you look around the room and you see the people that you have been in church and in community with for however long you have been here, no matter what decisions are made moving forward, those are the same people that you have always loved and prayed with and shared your family with. And as Mel was saying, I can have my say, but I may not have my way. We're all going to have a chance to have our say. And as we do that, it's really important to continue to love one another. And at the end of the day, even if the name on the door changes, it's the people inside that make up the church. And you continue to remain being the people of this church.
Mel, do you have the microphone?
It's right here.
Got it. Okay.
All right.
So we can pass that. So questions. What questions do you have?
There was a question that came in after you started talking about the building. Was there a recent upgrade in technology? So I think we can just say yes.
Yes. So we did a significant upgrade to the technology that we are using to live stream our stuff in here. You'll notice we have several cameras now. And so our live stream product is much better. And there I am on the big screen. Woo!
That's terrifying. For me, not for you. Shoot, I messed this up. There was a question of what will happen to UMCOR.
Well, I don't think the United Methodist Church is going away.
I'm talking to Madeline.
I don't think the United Methodist Church is going away, so I suspect that UMCOR will continue. And honestly, I mean, I think that's one of the things that that we hold in common is what they do and the disaster relief that they're so good at. And, you know, there would nothing that would preclude us from giving money directly to UMCOR if we were a part of another denomination. And I suspect that over time that the Global Methodist Church is going to end up supporting UMCOR in some way. So, but that's a guess.
If we join the GMC, will Mike and Leanne still be able to minister in our church?
Yes, if we both go to the GMC. So the way that would work is we would have to turn in our ordinations, which she's, by the way, being ordained on the Tuesday of annual conference. But the way that would work is we'd have to turn in our ordination papers at the United Methodist Church, and then we would then be accepted and ordained in the Global Methodist Church. And so, yes, we can, assuming we choose to go to the Global Methodist Church. And yes. You have to go to the question, to the microphone. Sorry.
The Global Methodist Church is the traditional position or the new
Right.
wave?
Okay. So the Global Methodist Church is taking the current position of the United Methodist Church as it relates to the same-sex issue and saying this is what we believe. So it really nothing changes other than we don't have people that are not following the rules over on the Global Methodist Church side. But they are basically taking the current position of the Book of Discipline of the United Methodist Church and saying, we like this, and that we want to continue with this. Does that answer your question?
Changing to stay the same. A lot of people have said that, yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Changing to stay the same.
Is the calendar of prayers available online? I know that it has been sent to Madeline, who intends to update the website after the town hall with all of the handouts that are available here, including the prayers.
I'm surprised but happy to hear that you're entering this process of discernment. But I didn't quite understand what is that process, and is it laid out already?
Okay. The process is unique for each church. Each church gets to sort of create what that looks like, which I'm happy about because there's not somebody mandating what that looks like from the top down. So we have to work with our superintendent on what that looks like and what that process looks like. And so, did I answer your question?
So this.
Can we get her turned on?
So this group here is meeting on Wednesday to start to outline what that process will look like. And I think I speak for everyone that we are entirely committed to transparency with the congregation. So we will share with you what that looks like as we discuss with the district superintendent as well.
Yeah. So like Mike said, it might include more town halls or like cottage meetings or visits with small groups and a chance for everybody to ask all the questions that they need answered. Nothing else here?
Logan?
So I have a question and then also just a request. So my question would be is how far along is the Book of Discipline for the Global Methodist Church? Because it seems to me that it is not quite set in stone, and that it's also not my understanding that it is as much of a copy and paste with cutting out as there are somewhat subtle differences that also maybe make large differences. for instance, of ordination, like the idea, like where does that leave an ordained deacon? It seems to me that that's just sort of a transitory position on your way to becoming an elder, and that those type of things will have major differences. And so I guess my request would just be to make that when we do have these like listening sessions and gathering, that we do spend some time going over what could be extremely boring details, but also extremely important, because they are creating a new book of discipline as far as it goes. So there are going to be some slight differences that can make large consequences.
Yes, there are. And I mean, their transitional book of discipline is online. I think one of at the handout I gave you, there's a link to it where you can go and do some research on it. But I mean, you're right. It's not set in stone, because the plan is that they have an 18-month transitional team, and then they'll have like a founding conference with the churches that have joined the GMC, in which things sort of get, written down. Hopefully not in stone, because things change, but where it gets finalized.
There's also on the handout a link to a chart that has some predicted differences between the UMC and the GMC as it relates to doctrine and discipline. That might be helpful to answer some of those questions.
Calvin?
You mentioned these financial commitments. Did I understand that correctly, that this set in stone, that we have to pay this if we leave? I mean, it was millions of dollars, if I understood it correctly.
Well, it's not millions, but it's a good chunk of change. So currently, myself, being me, I wasn't quite satisfied with the answer of I can't give you the number until you go into this process. So I know a guy who told me how to calculate the number, and so I calculated the number, and our current number is somewhere around $250,000 for unfunded pension liabilities. But I am hearing that there is significant momentum amongst the cabinet and other leaders in the annual conference to shrink that number significantly, because, as I have pointed out to our leadership and others, this is a really bogus number, and it's some voodoo math that is in creating it. And so
who made this rule that we got to pay this?
The annual conference.
It is a rule.
Yes, it is a rule. If we choose to disaffiliate through this process, with the recent court case, there may be other options for us to exit. So, Logan?
Is this question of human sexuality the only issue that's driven this split, or are there other issues at work that this is kind of the culminating factor behind it?
So,
go ahead. That's a good question. I think that the simple answer to that is no. It's not the only issue. I think governance overall has become a much larger issue in terms of how well the United Methodist Church is able to continue to function given the divisiveness that exists inside of it, and the lack of accountability that's being held for people who break the rules. So,
I mean, what has held our denomination together has been a covenant that we all made to follow the rules of the Book of Discipline. And in my mind, that covenant was destroyed when we had a whole jurisdiction that failed to follow that covenant. I mean, when you hear Leanne ordained, she's going to promise to uphold the Book of Discipline as it's written, whether we like it or not. I mean, I made that same vow. And so it's sort of interesting. And so what has held us together, I think, for so long has, I won't say vanished, but it's not as strong as it was. So, Melissa.
Isn't the trust clause part of the Book of Discipline too, though? So if we don't pay our trust, aren't we breaking the covenant that you're so worried about the West Coast people breaking their covenant?
Yeah, I think the covenant's broken.
Yeah. And so my other thing is, if they broke their covenant and they had their jury among their peers, and their jury said, it's okay, why do we have a say in that? I mean, isn't it their jury that takes care of them and our jury takes care of us?
Well, I mean, yes, there's some truth to that, but the Book of Discipline still says that you cannot have same-sex weddings in United Methodist churches, nor can their clergy do them. And so they're ignoring those. And so what she is alluding to is that the disciplinary authority for a pastor who breaks the rules is his or her annual conference. And so, I mean, let's say you catch me stealing money, and it's not enough for you to want to file criminal charges, but you want me out of here. You all have the right to file charges against me in the church, not criminal charges, violation of church law. Well, the jury that would hear the case against me would be a jury of my peers. And so what's happened in the case of people who are violating the marriage restrictions in our Book of Discipline is the jury that has, where there have been charges, they've stopped filing charges, but where there have been charges, basically the jury was sympathetic to the position of the pastor that did the same-sex wedding, and so it was like, shame on you, take a week off with pay and write a 2-page paper. So there was not much in the way of punishment, and I think the 2019 General Conference was put trials on hold for people that violated that. But, I mean, you know, you make an interesting point that they're doing their thing and we're doing our thing, but we're all beholden to the same book. And I'm talking about the Book of Discipline, not the Bible, but we're all beholden to that book too, and it's more important than the other one.
Yes.
But
I think that your question and Logan's question kind of go hand in hand, because if different annual conferences did have their own trials and juries and they made a solution, and you know, what does that have to do with us? Can't we all just continue? But the issue has become to where, because of the dissension has made it so that the general conference is no longer functioning. Like, you know, they're just this continual kicking of the can down the road has created this situation. And so...
Yeah, and I will say that while the human sexuality issue is important to me, I mean, I have just become, myself, personally speaking, just increasingly frustrated with the inability of the United Methodist Church to govern itself. It has become, frankly, a more important issue to me than the human sexuality one. So, and I know I have peers that feel that way as well. We've got a conference question online. Will there be bishops and superintendents in the GMC? Yes and no. There will be bishops, but they will not be bishops for life. They will be bishop for whatever time they're supposed to serve, and then they're just Joe Schmo clergy person again. So they don't hold a special place in the life of the church. They're not initially going to have superintendents like we have superintendents. They're going to have a position that goes back to our Book of Discipline sometime in the 50s, I think, somebody called a supervising elder. And so that pastor will hold a place in a church and then oversee, say, 6 or 7 churches and elders that are in her or his area. So that's the plan as I understand it at this point. Yes, ma'am?
Since our administrative board has decided to go into discernment, I'd like to know if that means we are definitely leading towards a church-wide vote.
I think the process of discernment needs to play out, but the most recent ruling by the Judicial Council, I think, forces that for every church at some point.
And do you know what the percentage should be? I know some people say, 59 or 51, 49, or 2/3, or
yeah. My understanding is the particular clause in the Book of Discipline that churches are using to exit is a simple majority.
Okay. And do we know how long our discernment period's going to last?
Say that.
How long will it last?
How long
will
is it
it
going to last?
The discernment period.
I know it's probably, I don't know.
Until we're satisfied that everybody's been heard and that it's time for a vote.
Will there be
So-
committees?
Pardon?
Will there be committees set up?
Will there be committees set up?
We hadn't gotten there.
Okay. I'd
Talk
like
to me
to
on
volunteer
Thursday.
if there is one, please.
Talk to me on Thursday. We're putting a process together for that.
Yeah, Michael, the main thing that to help people understand is that how important it is that whatever we decide to do, we do it before President Bishop leaves, because we know we have a loving bishop that's willing to abide by what the churches decide individually. We have no idea what the new rules are going to be instituted. We have no idea. And the other thing, isn't it true that in the Global Methodist Church, the pastors can stay longer if they choose to and if the congregation is happy with them?
Okay. So Lyle is pointing out that there may be a timing issue that, to put it crassly, there might be a time where the getting out is good with currently Bishop Jones. We could have another bishop that might come in and try to change the rules. Although I think with this recent case law that's happened in Texas, I think a bishop would have a hard time requiring a payment of assets as you go on. So the Global Methodist Church does not have guaranteed appointment, and the bishop has a lot less power, and the churches have a lot more autonomy. And so, for example, I could stay here as long as you all want me, or my wife lets me retire, whichever comes first. But with that, if you all decide Leanne is a good replacement for me, you can create a transitional plan, or we can hire somebody else to do that. I mean, you as a church have a lot more autonomy. And the good news is, if you like your pastor, the bishop doesn't have the authority to pluck them out because he or she's got a problem someplace else that they need Mike or Deborah to fix or whoever. So, Brian.
A couple of questions, if you will. One, it's my understanding in the Book of Discipline, there are 2 specific paragraphs that apply to individual churches disaffiliating. Again, it's my understanding that the one that applies by precedent almost all the time requires a 2/3 vote of the membership in order to disaffiliate. How do we look at 50% plus 1?
So there are 2 clauses, 2 paragraphs in the Book of Discipline. The one that you're talking about was one that was created at the 2019 General Conference. And it is, if you're leaving over an act of conscience regarding the same-sex issue, it requires a 2/3 vote. But there's another paragraph that's been in there since the 40s that allows a church to disaffiliate, and it requires a simple majority. And for the churches that have already left our annual conference, both our Way Left Church and our Way Right Church, they all use that paragraph. And that is the paragraph that our cabinet and our annual conference has made rules around.
Great, thanks for the clarity.
Sure.
Second question is, thank you for laying out so much good information on the Global Methodist Church and where we're headed in our period of discernment with this. Can we also have a commitment from this group here that the more moderate positions of the United Methodist Church are also as actively presented and considered and spoken about? Again,
Absolutely.
I take a look at what's here, and there's great Global Methodist stuff here. But other groups, like within our annual conference, that we may be one group that
Right.
is espousing United Methodism, also be central in our conversation.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, for sure. I think that this was a chance to sort of educate people who don't even have any idea that this was coming down the pike,
Yeah, you
that
gotta
there
throw it
was
out
another
there.
denomination. And
Yeah.
so, kind of put out the information about what it is.
Right.
But certainly, as we go through the period of discernment, it's going to be important to look at what will be left of
Great.
The United Methodist Church.
Because we got
Post-split.
We're seeing all the warts and wrinkles of United Methodism here, and with this period of discernment here, we also ought to look at the warts and wrinkles on the other side too, as well
Yep.
as the great things
Right.
that both have to offer.
Yeah.
Is he on, Madeline? Okay.
I'm just not close
There
enough.
we
to
go.
Oh, there we go.
You know, for somebody who's hung out with this, I should know better. So,
Yeah, but for sure, we want all voices to be heard as a part of this discernment process. So, for those of you that, are really advocating staying a part of the United Methodist Church, we want to hear you. We want you to be a significant part of the conversation. We need to hear from everybody and all their thoughts.
And there's a couple of different, there's a website called StayUMC, and I don't remember if it's .org or .com, but they lay out some arguments and some concerns. There's a caucus within the Texas Annual Conference called That We May Be One, that's another group. I don't know if they have a particular website or if it's just the emails that but they have a lot of information as well.
yeah, their website's up and active.
Okay, great.
So, and great information and presentation.
Well, and,
Thank you.
I urge you all to do your homework. We have Google, and you can go out and read a whole lot about what's out there. So I urge you to be informed consumers of everything that we're talking about. Yes, ma'am.
First of all, thank
Karen, you're going to have to pull that microphone down.
Thank
There we
you
go.
for
There
being
you go.
so accessible.
Yeah, real close to it.
My question is, other than the question or the issue of human sexuality, could you talk to us a little bit about whether there are theological differences between the global Methodist
Church
and the United Methodist Church? Well, first of all, you said other than the difference. Again, the Global Methodist Church position on that issue is going to be the same as the current United Methodist issue, United Methodist stance on that issue. So those are kind of one and the same. Although that's not to say that at the 2024 General Conference, the United Methodist Church won't in the future change the Book of Discipline in regards to that issue. That's kind of one of the expected differences of the future churches. Other than that,
I mean, I recently read something about some subtle theological words. I mean, and look, this is preacher nerd stuff, but they were talking about more use of the word convicting grace in Wesley's discussion of grace as it relates to the global Methodist Church. But they're largely very similar. The real difference, I think, comes in polity, in how we function. The church has a lot more authority in the Global Methodist Church. You own your own property in the Global Methodist Church. There is no trust clause. So the day that you become a part of the Global Methodist Church, there's no more trust clause. And then the whole appointive process is different. They've gotten rid of the guaranteed appointment. So I think the big differences, I think, for me are not really theological, but really polity, how they're going to be function and organized. So you may be able to go and read some documents and nitpick on some small, subtle differences, but I think they're going to be largely the same, certainly Wesleyan. Now, I've heard some people talk about the Global Methodist Church might become a creedal church, and let me just speak to what that is. So, a creedal church is a church that says you have to be able to say exactly this, basically believe what I believe, or you can't be a part of the church. The Global Methodist Church has no intention of that. They want to have sort of, other than the human sexuality issue, they want people to have differing ideas of theology. And so, but they are a creedal church in the sense that they believe the Apostles' Creed. So, there's a sort of a definition of a creedal church that says you have to believe exactly what I believe or exactly what's on this piece of paper, or you can't be a part of it. And so they are not going that way. That's not the point. That's not the direction that they're going. So,
Well, and even on that issue, I think there will still be room, I would hope, for lay people to think differently.
Absolutely.
There's room for centrists and moderates, but we're agreeing to live under the rule in terms of marriage and clergy, which is a rule we've lived under as United Methodists since, 1972, you said? So, yeah.
other questions?
Oh, you want me to look at this? No.
Nope.
Do you have a question?
He is sauntering to the microphone.
I guess what I have is an observation and then a question at the end of it. And a lot of us have all been through a lot of different change initiatives here. And this is starting to sound a lot like some of the other change conversations that we've had in the past. Personally, when I've been involved in all of those different change events, each time that that's happened, it's always felt like the decision was already made before we had the meetings and before we really had the conversation. We went into this at various points. We already kind of knew what the outcome was, and the conversations were all steered that way. And this, to me, feels very similar. It feels like we're starting a conversation, and the outcome is already pointing towards the Global Methodist Church. Before we've even had the discussions, before we've really even gotten to know what that outcome really is. So my question is, when we do get to the point where we do make that decision, why would we choose either one? What's the real benefit from choosing either of these? If we have an opportunity to make real change, and we have an opportunity to have that change directly affect the people here, why would we choose either one of these? If on one hand, the Global Methodist Church is still very ill-defined and hasn't set its ways, and we're making a decision that we don't want to be a part of what is or what becomes of the United Methodist Church, when we do get to that point, why join either one?
Okay, so are you asking why not be like just a community church? Okay. So it's an interesting question. And I would say, first off, I think part of being Methodist is being in connection with other Methodists. And so I think that's a big part of the Methodist ethos over and above just the United Methodist Church. I mean, that's Wesleyans have always sort of gathered together. And I think there's some economic reasons that make it better to be a part of a denomination, in particular pension management and health care that would be available to your potentially laity and or your clergy. So I think those are some of the reasons that you'd look at being a part of a denomination, whichever one. But I think those would be some of the reasons that I would suggest that you would want to be a part of a larger denomination as opposed to a Atascocita community church. So, but that certainly can be a part of our discussion.
Yeah.
So.
And as to your other observation, I don't disagree with you. I can see how it looks like that.
Hey, Beth.
Primarily because, again, people before today maybe didn't even know the GMC existed. So we kind of had to put that out there as this is an option. But, I mean, Mike and I both are committed to following the will of the church. This is a decision that you all have to make. And like Mike said, do your own research and find out what all the different options are and read about what has happened. And I mean, we serve as your clergy at the pleasure of the bishop and SPR. We can't dictate this choice for you. That is up to the ad board and all of you as voting members
I mean,
of the
truth
church.
is, I don't even get a vote.
Yeah.
So.
We're not members here. We're members of the Texas Annual Conference. So it's your vote, not ours.
So any more questions?
Why are we in such a hurry? Why can't we wait to see how things turnout with the Global Methodist Church, what they actually, how they set it apart. Why do we have to do it now?
Well, there is the possibility we may get a new bishop and the window to leave may close, is one of the reasons. The second is that we have to pay 2 years apportionments. So if we leave in 2022, we paid last year's 100%. We have the ability to pay this year's, and we will pay most of them. It's just those last general ones that we pay. To wait until 2023 would cost us another $75,000-ish because we'd have to pay 2023 apportionments. So, but there is no hurry. So.
No, yeah, no, it's not just about the money. It's just that's one of the practical
those are just
aspects
some
of
of
the decision.
Right, but there isn't a hurry other than the and we'll get a better feel for this once we get a judicial council ruling. The fact that we might have a bishop change, and that may be a reason to hurry.
And that's just good information for people to know, like if we're talking about how long we want the process to take, or what's the hurry, to answer your question. You need to go into it knowing that another year will be another additional cost. And so just to have those expectations set.
Okay, so we've heard from all the other parts of the church except for the Weekday Learning Center. And so I asked Beth to come up and just give us a brief description of what's happening there and to share some news.
Yeah, I have some awesome and amazing and wonderful news. Well, you've seen the playground. Mike's talked about the playground and all the blessings that we have received from the playground. And, I have been in the position of the director for, gosh, I don't even want to think back how many years. It's like 27-ish plus years that I've been the director, and I've been through ups and downs and all arounds, and God always comes through for us. And what Mel was saying earlier about momentum and vectors and heading that way, I am not physics. My daughter teaches physics, but God is building some major momentum here. It was just before the pandemic when I was really, really concerned about where we were going as far as the school. We were in a decline in our numbers, in our enrollment, and I was doing a lot of trying to make some special things happen. I'd tell the teachers we got to push our name out there. There's a lot of centers that were coming in the area. You're competing against a lot of big facilities that are chains that have a lot of money behind them. And we do such amazing work here, and it's so different of an experience than something like a chain, but we got to get our name out there so people would know that. Even though the community knew us and lots of people would always send people our direction, we still were in a struggle little bit of a place. And then the pandemic hit, and my amazing staff went into overdrive, and they pushed our name out there. It was like God was just orchestrating it all and making it all happen. And then, we were able to pay them all through the pandemic with reserve that we had, and then all of the PPP loans came through, and we were able to recoup all of that and move forward. And then, as we talked earlier, Stacy talked about, seizing upon the terribleness of the freeze. We were still able to redo our whole Life Center, and we got new furniture for the entire school, both sides, which benefits with our children's ministries of the church. And then we get to now. And we have started our registration this year, and we are completely 100% full in our Monday, Wednesday, Friday program with waiting lists, which we haven't been in that place in years. It's been a lot of years since we have had waiting lists already at this point in time of the year. We haven't even hit the summer yet, and the move of people transitioning into our neck of the woods, you know, as they're moving into the Atascocita, Huffman, Crosby, Kingwood area. And then Mike gave me a call, and he said, you know, Beth, I have a friend, and she has gotten something, and I wonder if you've looked into this yet. And I said, well, yeah, I got a few emails on that, and I just delete, because that's some more paperwork I got to do, and that's something else I got to fill out, and I don't know that I really want to go there right now. We've done all this other stuff right now. We're in the middle of redoing a playground because of that wonderful grant that we got to get started, and all of the wonderful donations from everybody to do that. And so he said, well, why don't you look into it? And so I did, and it was a little bit of a process. I got a little bit of a snafu with some application errors that I had to go up the chain of the powers that be with handling that kind of online paperwork stuff. But bottom line is, this is just more amazing than anybody could ever think of, because I just about died when I saw it. It's predetermined, a predetermined amount, and this is through the Texas Workforce Commission. The state of Texas, they started it last year in 2021, and they wanted to reach out and to help child care centers who had made it through the pandemic and who are still open or that we're planning on opening very soon. I didn't get on the train back in 2021, but we got on the train for 2022. And I did not choose the amount. And when you put in your facility name and you put in your facility number with the state, and then it pops up the amount that you are going to be granted should you get approved. And that is based on our area, on our location, based on our enrollment, based on our licensing and how we stand with licensing in the facility, how much we can have in the facility. So, drum roll please, would be great if I had one. We are receiving $599 and $1,009. $599,009. So, I mean, woo, you know? I mean, it's just like, could never have fathomed anything like that. We received it in four individual quarterly payments that come to us. There are things that we have to make sure that we use that money for. And the main things that we have to use that money for are, of course, to value our staff. We need to help our staff realize how important that they are and how much we value them. We need to be able to service the needs of our children and the community that we have that comes to us. We also need to use those funds to improve the facility. We can't do any major construction, but we can do things that can help our classrooms and other things like more stuff on the other old playground, other things that can all go toward. It's just so amazing. I know my teachers, I told them on Friday, Mike has sworn me to secrecy, and so I told them on Friday there's a really important announcement. I sent them a video at 12:15, so several of them have already gotten it because I told them I can't tell you before I'm in this town hall meeting and announcing it. So a few of them have already sent me text messages as I've been in this meeting about how excited they are. But yeah, when they left on Friday, I mean, I could have been bribed with a lot because they were all wanting to know so bad, because I told them it's nothing like you would ever be able to guess and imagine, because it certainly wasn't for me. When I saw that number, I thought it was wrong. I thought there's just no way. $599,000, there's just no way. But yeah, way, because God has plans for us here. God didn't plan for us to stop serving the children in the community of Atascocita, Kingwood, Huffman, Crosby, all over the places that we reach. God doesn't plan for us to stop at all. He's pushing us on forward. And that means this church doesn't just mean the Weekday Learning Center, because the Weekday Learning Center is this church. And we wouldn't be this school if it wasn't for this church and these people. And so I want you to remember that as we go forward with all of this other stuff that's going on, that God has amazing plans, and we can't get in the way of the plans that He has for us here at Atascocita.
So Beth will be preaching next Sunday. she's much better at it than I am. So we have one handout that we would like for everyone to get. And it is our prayer calendar that we are asking you to pray through as we begin the discernment process. And by hopefully the end of the week, we'll have a process that we will share with you as soon as we can. But please take that prayer calendar and pray your way through that. I also printed out, for those of you that would like to read it, a 14-page paper by a woman that's a retired clergywoman of the Texas Annual Conference. Her name is Elizabeth Moreau. She's done a number of studies, and she's a prolific writer. And she gives a pretty good synopsis of sort of what I did in 20 minutes.
How we got
here. How we are where we are. And so it's out there. If you'd like to pick it up, pick it up. You don't want to pick it up, leave it lie. So we'd like to end with a prayer. So let us pray. Gracious God, we know that hard things are facing us. And Father, we ask that you would never let the faces of our fellow church members be far from our mind. These people that we have worshiped with in this place for so many years are all our people. We ask, Father, that you would remind us to treat each as a child of God. For all are unworthy, but Christ died for all. Write that on our hearts that as we have these difficult conversations, that we remember that we are all children of God. All had the same sacrifice paid for them. Father, we ask that you would bless our time together. As we go out in this place, let us be beacons of your love and your grace for the world to see. We pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. You are dismissed, and if you're like me, I'm hungry.